Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Phoenix, Arizona, it's time for Phoenix Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Welcome to We All Serve, a podcast series brought to you by Arizona Employer Support of the Guard and Reserve. I'm your co-host and moderator, Mike Phillips. I'd like to introduce our other co-host, Dan Irving, the Arizona Director for ESGR. Good afternoon, Dan.
Good afternoon. I'm looking forward to a great show this afternoon.
Same here, Dan. Before introducing today's special guest, I'd like to again thank Karen Nowicki and Phoenix Business RadioX for their ongoing support of this podcast series. We appreciate the opportunity to tell the ESGR story. And now on to what promises to be a terrific program. We're honored today to have as our guest, via Zoom, Ron Bogle, the National Chair of Employer Support of the Guard and Reserve. Good afternoon, Mr. Bogle.
Mike, good afternoon. It is great to be here with you.
Great. Thank you for your time today. We're excited to get an update on ESGR programs and initiatives. But before we launch into that, please share with us a little bit about your background in both the military and civilian worlds.
Mike, my background is really pretty much like a lot of our ESGR volunteers' background. Went into the military, active duty military in the 1960s. I was one of those products of the Vietnam War generation. And I went into active duty in the 1960s and served, finished up my service with active duty service in Vietnam with the Army. Returned back to what I thought originally was going to be my destination when I began my life plan. And I didn't really factor in military service as a part of that life plan, but other factors and circumstances directed me in that direction. So I was proud to serve in the military, but it was a really unpopular time. As you probably know, Vietnam veterans did not receive ticker tape welcome home parades, and in many ways they were cursed, spit upon, and assaulted for their service in Vietnam by those who apparently thought that it was the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and coasties who were actually declaring this war and not our political leaders. But after that, after I got out of the service, I went to law school, which had been my initial dream in life, was to go into law school. I went to the University of Bogle and graduated from there. And my first real job, a lawyer job out of law school, was as a federal prosecutor with the United States Department of Justice. After about 3 years of that and learning how to be a lawyer, I entered private law practice, where I stayed for about 10 years in Hickory, North Carolina, then entered the state judiciary. I now have had a total of about 20 years of judicial service. Some people ask me now if I'm retired, and I tell them only from earning income, as I've had the opportunity to become an ESGR volunteer. And I will say that even after entering the law practice, I actually like being part of the military very much. And I entered reserve service for a period of years until my judicial service and reserve service collided, and it was just too difficult for me to continue in that direction. And so I returned to what my career path was with the judiciary. So that's a little bit of early history about Ron Bogle, and I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Judge. That's really impressive. Talk to us a little bit about what drew you to ESGR. I know you had this great military career, and you talked about its importance in your life, but why specifically ESGR?
One of the things that I think is really unique about ESGR, I've been, in my lifetime, I've had the opportunity to be parts of many boards and commissions, board of directors, and other opportunities. And I have a volunteer spirit at heart. But most of those volunteer activities are not activities in which they necessarily lend that element of passion and patriotism. They are things that we do because we're good citizens. We care about our communities, we care about our states, we care about our nation, and we do the service. But ESGR, I was approached actually while I was on the bench, someone who was in ESGR in North Carolina, and he asked me about becoming an ESGR volunteer. And he didn't have to answer. Once he told me what they do, that they were there to stand in support of the men and women who serve in the nation's Guard and Reserve, he didn't have to ask me a second time. I jumped at the opportunity to become a volunteer in that organization. And it is one of those extraordinary experiences for me. You know, when I look at the average volunteer within ESGR, and I have the opportunity to deal with volunteers all over the nation, there's something that separates ESGR volunteers from a lot of volunteer organizations. And I don't mean to exclude anybody, because there are some great volunteer activities out there. And people have to find what they're passionate about in their heart in terms of what to support. For me, personally, I welcomed and embraced the opportunity to stand in support of those people who put on that uniform. And I tell people that for ESGR, it is volunteers, it is a labor of love. The ability to get out and serve and support these great Americans who serve in our Guard and Reserve and their employers is its own reward in itself. So that's my story about ESGR and how I got there. It's a great opportunity, and I love every minute of it. And I've been an ESGR volunteer for well over 15 years at this point.
Yeah, hey, Ron, this is really great that you share that story, because so many times I have people ask me, hey, how do I have to have military service to be a volunteer? And my answer is always no. You don't have to have military service to be a volunteer for ESGR. I mean, your story is like most stories that I hear. People want to do it because they want to support the troops and support the nation and the employers. But, that's like my story. My story is very similar, but different, because my experience with ESGR has been, I was a guard guy. I was full-time guard for 38 years, retired. And I saw firsthand what our service members were going through with employer issues or financial issues, or, just all kinds of personal issues on these deployments and stuff. And I've also worked with some of the employers where they would call and we'd talk to them. And I understand their hardships as well when they've got somebody deployed for that period of time, a month or 6 months, whatever that is. And when I retired in 2013, I decided that I needed to give back, because I understand both sides. And I think that that's what was my drive to do this. And I'm like you. I love the military. I love the military service men and women. But more importantly, I understand that the employers are just as important, because without those employer support, they can't do their mission. They can't accomplish their mission. And eventually what happens, I've had people actually leave the Guard because they love their job, but they just didn't want to make waves. And so they quit the Guard. And so I think that our volunteers are all dedicated. They're patriots. They're committed, and they want to make a difference. And I'm glad you shared that story, because here's a judge on the bench, right, being approached, and he goes, "Sure, I'm on board. I want to be a part of this." And it's a great part of this. And so thanks for sharing that. I just, I hear so many stories, and I know you do too, because that's what we do. And we hear people come up to us all the time. So that's great. And so if anybody's interested, please let us know, because we can use volunteers.
Amen.
Yeah. Judge, talk to us a little bit about how ESGR came to be. How old is it, and what is its mission?
Next year, we will be celebrating our 50th anniversary as a program of the Department of Defense. We were actually established in 1972 as our political leaders made the decision to end the military draft, something that they had been listening to the vocal protests about the war in Vietnam and in general, but specifically about military conscription. It certainly didn't, that idea about protesting about military draft didn't originate with my generation. They have been protesting military draft since first used in the American Civil War. But the nation's Congress decided that it was time to enter the military as it looked like the war in Vietnam was winding down. It was the appropriate time to end military draft. And they did that, going to an all-volunteer force. And the truth is, there were many detractors of that notion. detractors about whether or not the nation could be sustained with an all-volunteer force, whether or not the nation was prepared to support it in the way they needed to support it. Many believe that our legislators knew one thing, and that is that the nation could not sustain a standing military force that would be required to meet what were anticipated future conflictual needs of our national defense apparatus. So the only way to do that, if they were going to eliminate the draft, was to ensure that we had a well-trained, well-equipped, well-led, and highly professional Guard and Reserve force. But they also understood that in doing that there was an inherent conflict between someone who is a full-time employee of an organization and also what some would describe as a citizen warrior who serves in the nation's Guard and Reserve. As Dan's pointed out, it is very difficult to mesh those two things without conflict. And at that time, there was really nothing in place that prevented the conflict. ESGR came along, and our mission was tuned in to eliminating that conflict, to educate our employers about the importance of the nation's Guard and Reserve, to work with them with an understanding position that there is a conflict, and we recognize that there's a conflict that occurs in the workplace and with conflicting military service. And I can tell you that over the last 20 or 30 years, the workplace environment has changed light years. And I won't say that ESGR has full responsibility for that change, but ESGR has been certainly a significant factor in bringing about that change across the nation with our employers. Because our job here, Dan and I have both alluded to our unwavering support for the men and women who serve in our nation's Guard and Reserve. And we feel the same thing for the active force. It's not just about our Guard and Reserve. And we feel the same thing for our veterans. There is something about this community that feels very strongly about supporting one another. But we also have a concurrent mission with supporting our nation's employers. And so it is an equal mission. And from my perspective, as a national chair, and it's just my perspective, I'm not controlling the direction of the organization. But from my perspective, our greatest priority is to outreach to our employers. That's really what is important for ESGR to be doing, to continue our outreach service to our nation's employers. The Guard and Reserve are well protected by law, and they're well protected within the Department of Defense. Our nation's employers are still in some ways on that learning curves about the importance of what they do and how their support really enhances the readiness of our nation's defense status with the Guard and Reserve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, education is so significant in that effort, and so is the recognition, because like you said, it's not easy, and there is going to be conflict. And I love the ESGR motto, "We all serve." It's so true. I mean, it really cuts to the heart of the issue, is that everybody has a role to play in this. Everybody has to pull on the rope together to make this work. And the fact that we've been an all-volunteer force since the 70s and all the changes that have occurred in the world really speaks well for that partnership. And certainly ESGR has played a role in that. Talk to us, both Ron and Dan, talk to us about how ESGR accomplishes that mission, maybe from the national level, and then, Dan, what you see here in Arizona.
Well, we do that through the use of what is our most extraordinary strength, our most extraordinary asset, and that's our 3,400 volunteers that are across this nation who stand in support of our nation's Guard and Reserve. We have 54 committees, one in each of the 50 states. We have three territorial committees, and then the District of Columbia committee, for a total of 54 committees. We get our job done by the boots on the ground volunteer who comes forward with ESGR. They have a lot to do, and Dan mentioned that he's had people who come in and said, "Do I need to be part of the military?" And the answer is absolutely no, you don't. In fact, the Defense Department wants ESGR to look just like our military force does. That's very diverse. in its background, its racial makeup, its gender makeup, its geographical makeup. So our role, even though we're 54 committees, and part of the challenge with ESGR is that we do it 54 different ways with those 54 committees, which is a management challenge. But we're all committed to the same goal, and that's to support the nation's Guard and Reserve and to work to develop a culture within our employer environment in which our employers across the nation value the hiring of people in the Guard and Reserve. And we would add to that also transitioning active force, people who are coming out of active duty military, and our veterans, because we believe that they bring a strong work ethic into the workplace. In fact, I think it's an invaluable work ethic that they bring into the workplace. And the investigational data about the hiring of military establishes that almost across the board, that they find greater satisfaction with the hiring of the military. But it has been a generational change to educate our employers about that. And today I look at the workplace for our people who are employers. They are extraordinarily important to our nation's national defense. They may not think of themselves, and it makes government lawyers a little nervous sometimes when I use the word partners, but I tell employers that they are important partners in our national defense. And I don't mean that as a word with any kind of legal significance or any kind of legal consequence. I mean that their support of those who are in the military creates just a sort of natural alliance or partnership about providing their part. Because the truth is, as I mentioned, when we created ESGR in the first place, they understood we didn't have the financial means to maintain that standing force. And that same thing is true today in 2021. We still do not have that standing means to sustain that standing force alone. And if we look at the last numbers I saw in February, were over 800,000 people are serving in our nation's Guard and Reserve. And those 800,000 they're approaching about 40% of our total force. And they're also working by and large in our nation's workplaces. So they have that dual role of employee of a civilian employer, but a citizen warrior when they put on that uniform. So for them to do that job well, they need to have the support of their nation's employers. So in addition to cultivating that environment in which the employers actually value the hiring of people serving the Guard and Reserve, we also want to cultivate that workplace that actually supports that Guard and Reserve service. And so we reach out in a lot of ways to recognize our employers through our awards program and other things. And I'll let Dan talk more about that, because they've got some interesting things here in Arizona that I think are really good news opportunities for our outreach and ways to recognize our employers for the great things that they're doing for their Guard and Reserve employees. Mm-hmm. Dan, why don't you take over and talk about some of those recognitions that we do?
I will, Ron, and thank you for explaining that. And what I tell employers too is what we have to, before I explain what we do here, I just want to point out that for the employers out there that are listening, when you think about it, our Guard and Reserve members, they take care of their family. In other words, they work for you. They're in the communities. That's how they support their families. They don't. The Guard and Reserve is a weekend, month, annual training, or they could get deployed at moment's notice. And that's always a burden on the family and things like that. But without that support of the employers, if employers didn't see the value of hiring them, or didn't want to do it because they were maybe afraid that they might get deployed, we would have people dropping out of the Guard and Reserve because they've got to work for the civilian employer. They have to. That's their bread and butter. That's where they feed their family. That's how they take care of their family. So that's a very important. So when we say that, and I think I'm just trying to add to what Ron said, when we say that the employers have a key vital role in this, we really mean they have a key vital role. This is big. But anyway, getting back to what we do here in Arizona, as Ron said, there's a lot of programs, and I think we're going to talk about post-pandemic after this. There's another little further on in the presentation. But what we do is we take and educate employers, and we do this through different events like Breakfast with the Boss. We'll bring employers to one of the units. We'll give them breakfast. We usually bring a commander in. Maybe we've had the adjutant general, which is the general over the Arizona Guard. We bring them in and we get them to get familiar with the military and let these commanders meet the employers, get them to understand what their Guard and Reserve member does when they're not working for them and they're working for the Guard. And what really works very well for us is we do boss lifts where we'll take employers up on a 2.5 hour mission on a KC-135 or a Black Hawk. Again, we take them up. They get a mission brief just like the crew would get a mission brief, so they know what the crew goes through. They can see the caliber and skill levels of the people that are working for them when they're not there and they're at their Guard job. So it's just to get that better understanding of the military. With the and I'm a believer of this, with all the BRAC closures over the years, it used to be everybody knew somebody in the military because there was always bases around and it was, you see people. Anymore, that's not there anymore. That connection is not there. There's a lot of people that don't know anybody in the military. And so we try to bring those employers in and introduce them so that they know who the commanders are and have a little mission brief on what they do. We want them to understand what their service members, what their employees bring to the workplace from the Guard and the Reserve, because it's a lot. Same thing with the active duty. So those are a couple things that we do that are really big in Arizona. We like doing those. COVID kind of slowed us down the past year. We haven't been able to do that, but we still try to stay in touch with our employers. The awards program, we have a very the national has a very robust awards program, and we have a lot of options at the state level to give employers awards. And probably the one that's most significant to me, and because it means so much, is the Patriot Award. And a Patriot Award is nominated by the Guard member or Reserve member. We can't do it. ESGR can't give these awards. These come from the member themselves. And what they'll do is they'll recognize their boss. And it's a Patriot Award. It's a very nice award. We go out and we present it. It gets us in. We talk a little bit about ESGR. We present the awards. And I'm going to tell you, there's nothing better than I love seeing the face on these supervisors' faces when they get this award and the CEOs in the room, right, during these presentations. It's big. We have a very, I just want to say real quick, and you've heard me say this before, we just have a great employer base here in Arizona. They are very supportive. We have a lot of Freedom Award winners. We'll talk about that here in a little bit later. But there's organizations in Arizona that have an ESGR wall, believe it or not, in their lobbies, or in the town of Gilbert has one in the chamber lobby of their committee meetings. And they have pictures of their service members. They've got their Freedom Award there. They've got a bunch of little things there. So there's a lot of things that we do with the employers to get them to understand the importance of their role, as well as the benefits of hiring Guard Reserve service members of sort. So that's really that's how we really concentrate on that. We have a good training program where we can go in and we train HRs if that's what they would like us to do, and that's at no charge. But we give them a presentation so they at least know we're there, we're available. And through the pandemic, our ombudsman service has been out there helping employers and service members. And, they can do that over the phone. And what happens is if there's any conflict between a service member and their employer, we provide a free service, mediation, and try to resolve that for them. And we have a pretty good success rate here in Arizona. Most of the time, it's just a misunderstanding. And we can go in and very easily clear that up. We have trained ombudsmen to do that. And that's a free service as well. So there's a lot of things that we do, and there's more than that, but that's That's the big stuff right now that we do for our employers. So with that, Ron, did you want to add anything to that? Did I miss something?
You did a great job in covering those things. And there's so much that ESGR does do with its 3,400 volunteers. And I do want to say, and again, to reiterate what Dan said, when we present these awards from our Patriot Award on up, our awards are basically generated by the Guard or Reserve employee who works for the particular employer or the supervisor or the company, that whoever is receiving this award, it's generated by that reservist who has, in some ways, is small. It may seem like a small way to the reservist, but to the employer, it's a big deal that they have taken time to recognize them for the support that they've provided to our Guard and Reserve personnel. And I also want the employers to understand at the same time that what they do by providing that kind of environment and that kind of workplace atmosphere, it does have a great impact on the readiness of our nation's Guard or Reserve. You may be thinking in terms of just equipment and other things that are used by the military, but it also applies to whether they're still in uniform to begin with. And by supportive employers, it keeps the Guard and Reserve employees able to stay and serve in uniform. So they're really important, and they really contribute overall to the readiness of our nation's Guard and Reserve.
Yeah, that is so true. And I've just done a few Patriot Awards, so I can tell you I visited a small architect's office in Scottsdale, and they had one Air Force reservist working there who nominated his employers for a Patriot Award. It was a husband and wife architecture team. And we presented the award, and they got to talk a little bit about all the contributions that the airmen had made to the business, and the airmen got to talk about how supportive the husband and wife team was to his service, and they all started to tear up. And it was really emotional and powerful. You know, it's not a big corporation. It's a little mom and pop business, but you could tell they were so appreciative of what he did, and he was so appreciative of the support that they offered, that it was special. And that's kind of ESGR is kind of the coalesce of that. You know, they make those moments happen, which to me is one of the special things about ESGR. It provides that recognition and that appreciation that otherwise is kind of hard to verbalize sometimes, or hard to demonstrate sometimes. And one question I wanted to ask before we got into some of the Arizona awards is, what makes ESGR different and unique in the Department of Defense? We're part of the Department of Defense, but as Ron, as you talked about, we're really run by volunteers, which is pretty cool. Talk a little bit about that. How's that environment come to be?
Yeah, it is. As I said right at the outset, our greatest resource, our greatest asset, our greatest strength are our volunteers. We were designed and we were created to be a volunteer organization, which makes us maybe not different than the all-volunteer force, except the all-volunteer force is making a career decision, and they're being reimbursed for that decision. We're making a decision to be a volunteer force for our nation's military, which makes us unique in federal government service. There are not that many organizations that actually act as volunteers within the nation's governmental units. But we are an all-volunteer force, which makes us very unique. We do have some full-time people staff who support us both in Washington. We have about 25 people in our Washington headquarters. And then each state committee has one full-time staff person to provide staff support for each state committee. Two states, Texas and California, because of their size, have two full-time staff people to provide support for the committees. But the role of the full-time staff with ESGR is really to provide staff support and assistance. And we have great staff personnel at both the national and the committee level. But it is the volunteers, the people who strap up the boots and put the leather to the ground, they're the ones who are actually going out and executing our missions, our plans, our opportunities with our employers and with our service members. So that makes us very unique. Something else that makes us very unique is we have a budget of about roughly $11 million. This is not confidential information. It's public source information. But when you look at the size of the national defense budget, it's really not a very large part of the national defense budget. But there is a value that goes with the service of each of our volunteers. And it does have an actual cash value of about $27.54, I think, is the actual hourly rate for volunteer service at this point. Pretty close. It may not be right on the penny, but it's 27 plus. And so for every volunteer hour that's contributed, and we work with our volunteers to be sure that they report all of their volunteer hours so that we can report this back to our national headquarters, and our national headquarters in turn uses this for our leadership to demonstrate the value of ESGR. But we have reached the point where ESGR has striven and was very close in a number of years to actually pay back to the government in terms of the volunteer hours an equivalency of what or almost an equivalency of what our funded budget was to begin with. So that we can look in 2000 and fiscal year 18, for example, our volunteers turned back $10.1 million in volunteer hours to the federal government. That was just based solely along the work product and the work effort of our volunteers. Fiscal year 19, they returned back $19.5 million. In fiscal year 20, the first year of the virus problem, $7.5 million. We've seen a dramatic turn down, not in volunteer enthusiasm and not in volunteer effort to try to reach our employers and service members, but in our inability to travel and our inability to do the person-to-person events. So it has resulted in a drastic reduction in the use of our funding that has been available. So that really makes us unique and extraordinary within ESGR, that we look striving to reimburse to the government, of all things, us reimbursing them for the money that they provide us to go out and do this great job with ESGR as a volunteer.
That's impressive. I didn't realize that. Talk about carrying your own weight or being a force multiplier. That's pretty cool. Speaking of pretty cool stuff, Arizona, once again, has got a couple of finalists for the Freedom Award, which is the highest honor that ESGR can bestow upon an employer. Dan, you want to talk a little bit about that process from this year? And then last year, we also had some success. Talk to our audience about the Arizona Awards program and what we've accomplished the last couple of years.
Sure. Arizona, we've had a lot of Freedom Award winners. A lot of our, this year, we happen to have the Nogales Police Department and Lofton Equipment Company. And I'll tell you, this is an accomplishment because I think we had 60 or 65 nominations here in Arizona. Now the national had more than that. Ron, I think it was what,
about 3,400 nominations.
About 3,400. So 3,400 nationally was submitted for nominations, and they pick 5 governmental, 5 small, and 5 large companies. So that's how it works. So they make that decision, and they'll be announcing that soon. But what happens is the ones that go to the secretary's office, they whittle them down to 30. So they get 30 companies that they send forward for them to decide on the 15 winners. They're not winners; they're recipients. I shouldn't say winners because they are recipients. They deserve it. They've earned it. These are companies that go above and beyond what they have to do. These are the companies that they don't do it because the law says they have to do it. They do it because it's the right thing to do, and they feel strongly about it, and they have good support programs for their Guard and Reserves, and they support them 100% of the time. And to get these awards, it's not just a scoring process, but it's a human interest stories, right? When they have members that have deployed, what they do with their families, if their family, a lot of times what happens is the family have a hot water heater go out, or they have something happen, they don't know who to call, and the employer will actually take care of that and help them with that, or change their schedule because of babysitting now. Maybe that's going to change the way they have to work, and so they do these type of things. We had one of our Freedom Award winners a couple of years ago. He actually, the CEO of the company, actually took the spouses and families out to dinner, and sat around and talked with them, made an evening event out of it, and a lot of them will stay in contact with their service members while they're deployed. And so there's just a lot of things that go into these nominations. And by the way, they have to be nominated by somebody. They have to be nominated by a service member that's employed with that company, that employer. So once again, we don't do it. This comes straight from the service member. In other words, they feel strongly enough that their organization has such a program and so much support for them that they're willing to put them in for this award. And it's a very prestigious award. Some of these companies have match pay while they're gone. Some pay for training. The law doesn't say you have to, but again, a lot of these companies that are Freedom Award recipients, they go over and above. They're above and beyond what they need to do, because they do. And I like to tell employers, especially when I'm talking with employers, a lot of times everybody wants to talk about the law. And you know what? The thing is I found that most employers want to do the right thing regardless of the law. And that's what I find personally here in Arizona. And that's why I say we have such good employers. And so our Freedom Award, they have not announced, but we do know that both these companies, and we're very proud of these companies, both of them are in the top 30. So that's good. So pretty soon, Ron, I don't know when they're going to announce the 15, but I hope soon. Last year it was kind of late because of COVID, and we didn't get the word right away.
Well, it is. I know that this is an anxious time for the state chairs. I spent 6 years as state chair of the North Carolina committee, and I know that this was a time when there was a lot of anxiety as we wondered when are they going to make the announcement. I would think it'll probably be June or July before it will be made. There will go through a vetting process. I've served as the vice chair of the National Selection Board, and there were some great nominees. I mean, there to be 3,400 nominations, and to whittle that down to the top 30 finalists. If they won nothing else, it would be such an honor and distinction to be in that category, the 30 best out of 3,400 of the nation's employers, because of our support for the nation's Guard and Reserve. But the Freedom Award is the highest award that the Defense Department gives to an employer for their support of the Guard and Reserve. So it's a big deal. And we started this process in the 1990s for the Freedom Award. And by the way, this year will be the 25th anniversary of the Freedom Award, in which our state committees will not only be celebrating those who are recipients of the award, but also the importance of the program. And what I've seen just personally in my years as a state chair and national chair is the dramatic change in what we've seen in the landscape with employers and how they embrace our military. You can see it. We have three sectors: a large business sector, which is 500 employees or more; small business sector, less than 500; and a public sector, which is like your law enforcement and your governmental agencies and hospitals, things of that sort. But it is an extraordinary thing that's gone on. We've seen over the years as employers, our nation's employers, particularly our large employers, have evolved to the point that they have veterans affinity groups within their organization, have military outreach within their organization. As Dan talked on, we see so many ways in which employers support their employees. Some just have weekly phone calls with them just to let them know, hey, things are going well to business. We're here to support you. We're watching out for your family. We're sending your units care packages. We're your team that you're working with at our business place is picking up the slack. They miss you and want you to get back, but they're taking care of your business. And don't worry about that. You worry about where you are and what you're doing for us. And that is a big deal. And I've seen, I won't identify the company, but I happened to be in an event recently in which that's how time slips away when I could still travel about and go to places where an employer from a very large company was there as a public speaker and was extolling the virtues of their veterans, their people in the Guard and Reserve, because of what they brought to the workplace. They talked about their veterans affinity groups, for example, to say we have groups for all sorts of activities in our business. Our most consistently high performer is our military groups. The most stable of our employee groups are our military groups. For some reason, that's kind of the way it is. So this is a large part and parcel of why we do this recognition with ESGR, is to raise the awareness and the appreciation of our employers for those who serve in the nation's Guard and Reserve. I know they're appreciative, whether they're an employer or not. They're appreciative of the service of our Guard and Reserve service members. And when you look at the numbers and you discover that less than 0.5% have actually worn the uniform, so it is important to educate our employers so that they'll know that our military personnel is not just what they see on television or in the movies. It's real life, and they've got real families, and they've got real needs, and it's really hard. And so, to the degree that our employers can contribute to making that their ability to serve the nation in a nation's defense is really important. And so, for our Freedom Award winners, when we look at a situation that we've got 25 years of giving the award, and we have less than 300 of the millions of businesses in our nation that have actually received this prestigious award. The competition has gotten much more fierce, much more competitive, and it's the beneficial part of it is it's also been some incentive for employers to do more, to find ways to recognize their Guard and Reserve service members. So recognition of our employers is the least that we can do with ESGR, to say, we see what you're doing. We know you're not asking us to award you for it, but we see what you are doing for our service members. And we want you to know that we recognize it, and we want to recognize you for what you're doing. It's a great opportunity.
Yeah, it's terrific. It's terrific. And it's also that sharing of ideas, getting that service that the businesses do for their employers out in the public domain, so other businesses can copy best practices. And it's just important to share that information and to, as you said, to recognize the good work that's going on in all the companies. We touched upon it in several different ways today, but COVID dramatically changed the way we did business at ESGR and the country did business. Ron, do you have any impressions as hopefully we're heading out of this tough period? Where are we at today in ESGR, and what can we expect in the future?
You know, I've been asked that question several times about what do you see for ESGR for the future? And whenever I'm asked that by a state chair or committee volunteer, I said, what's really a more important question is what do you see for the future? Because the reality of it is that you're going to decide what that future is, and it is, as it always has been, is based upon the great creativity and the great work being done by our committees and our committee volunteers, and the support provided to the committee staff and our national staff in Washington. They have done extraordinary things, and so when I look at the future, ESGR's mission has been unchanged since 1972. I don't see any way, shape, or form of that mission changing, although there are some that would argue about nuancing that mission to embrace other things. But the reality of it is that we'll continue with our primary missions. That's the one forecast I'm willing to make. But to be really straight about it, Mike, as I said earlier, I think that the COVID virus, as contemptible as it is, and has presented ESGR with an opportunity. And for the first time, I think that we've had to look beyond what we've been doing as a committee for the last 50 years. And we have to look forward in terms of how are we going to do our job better? How are we going to do it more effectively? How are we going to do it more efficiently? And how are we going to do it more economically? So it has, for the first time with ESGR, transitioned us into a virtual force in many ways. We're beginning to ease up restrictions where we are allowing some opportunities for our volunteers to get out and do in-person events, but we're still driven by Department of Defense guidance about the opportunity for our personnel to get out and do that. We're also driven by ESGR policy. We're driven by the state and local policies. So there is nobody that wants our volunteers to be able to get out and do in-person opportunities than I do. And I know our national staff feels exactly the same way. And I know our state chairs feel the same way. I hear from all of them about that same thing, that they want to get back to it. The time isn't right yet. Is it improving? I hope so. But there are some things on the horizon that don't look so great either. So I can't predict that. But what I can predict is that as we go forward, just like all the military services that we have supported, they've had to transform themselves in a lot of ways. Aside from the virus, they've been transforming themselves for years. And when I look to the future of ESGR, I see that as an opportunity for us to begin looking at how we can transform ESGR to make us more efficient, more effective in our job and what we do and how we do it. We can't just keep doing it the same way we've always done it. So we've seen extraordinary, I think, rewards for us in terms of our outreach. For example, an opportunity like this with this program is an extraordinary opportunity for us to take, this message from a simple North Carolina country boy and convey that message across this nation. And it's an important, powerful nation. But I've been part of virtual events with what I would consider very significant large corporations in America. And we've done these virtual events, and you see the CEO of that organization lounging in his or her office with their sweater on, and they're just very casual about it. And they're receiving, or somebody in their employment is receiving some award from the ESGR, or maybe they're signing a statement of support. But it's being streamed across the country, and it's been streamed internationally. And that's such a powerful opportunity for us. And I can give you another quick example. Last year, for our ESGR nominations for the Freedom Award, we had about 2,600 nominees. This year, in the face of COVID, we had 3,400 nominees, about a 30% increase in a year in which everything would say, we're not going to get anything near the number of Freedom Awards we did. Instead, we go up 30%. But we went up 30% because we had a public affairs staff at our headquarters that did an extraordinary job. We had extraordinary support from our committees who virtually and every other way possible were working to get that message out. We used the technology that's available to us to make ourselves that effective, efficient, economical organization that we want to be. And my biggest fear is once the virus goes away, and it can't go away fast enough as far as I'm concerned, is that we don't develop the attitude, well, now let's go back to doing it the way we've always done it. So I hope we'll seize on that moment. It's a carpe diem moment as far as I'm concerned. And I hope that we'll seize on that moment to go forward with the continuing transformation of ESGR to make us that much more effective for those that we support and serve, both our service members and our employers.
Yeah. And Ron, we had a little conversation yesterday, you and I did, and I think we're both in agreement on that going forward, I think you're going to see a lot more of these type of Zoom meetings you're going to see some presentations, maybe some briefings, maybe some training with employers and service members when it makes sense to do. And we've proved we can do it, as you said yesterday. And so I think that, you're right. We've been doing this since the early 70s, and nothing's really changed. But I think this forced our hand into making changes. And I'll be the first to admit it was a little rough for us last year because most of our volunteers in the state of Arizona are like me, gray hair, and they like the person. They don't want to, don't bother me with Microsoft Teams or Zoom. I want to go present. And it's been a real challenge for us, but I think we're going to get better at it. We're going to get better at it. There's some states that are out there doing some really good stuff. We've all been benchmarking off each other. And so I think we're going to do pretty good on this. I think we're going in the right direction. We're going in a good direction. In fact, we're getting ready to start our new strategic plans here in Arizona. And I'm sure, you guys put out your strategic plan as well, which everything we do is planned. And I think we'll come out of this okay. I really do.
I do too. I think we're going to come out of this stronger and better for it. And, I think that our volunteers, we've heard their message loud and clear. We want to get back to doing business, and we want them to get back to doing business. In theory, my role as national chair should have me traveling 2 or 3 times a month to various locations to meet with committees and to be part of significant events for our employers and things of that sort. I haven't traveled since February of 2020, so it's been over a year since I have had any travel at all. So all of my business has been conducted in sort of this virtual setting. And I'll tell you, there's a reason that I went to law school and not technical school. And so it's taken me some time to get my arms around the technology. But I'm a convert. I have seen the power that it has brought to ESGR. I have seen the outreach that it has brought to us in ways that were never imagined. And I salute our public affairs staff, and I salute the great work of the committees that have done that have done such an extraordinary job in doing this. And I hope we'll continue to move forward in that direction in the future.
Hey, Ron, I know we're running short on time, but I just have one more. I have a question for you. What would you say to a person that might be interested in volunteering for ESGR?
I would say 2 things. First, I would say to ESGR volunteers, ask somebody. Sometimes that's the hard thing for us to do as volunteers is to ask somebody, would you like to be a part of this? So do that. And I would say that we have great need for more volunteers. So we've talked a little bit about the social outreach and the social media and the technology that's available for us. We need some young people who have far more experience than I can begin to imagine in that arena, far more understanding of its uses, far more understanding of its power. We need people that can do that. We've got jobs waiting for them that can help us get better and more effective. And they don't need to worry about going out and briefing military units if that's a difficult thing for them. Maybe they don't want to do award presentations if that's a difficult thing for them. Maybe they don't want to fly on one of those KC-135s because they get airsick, whatever. We'll find a job for them. But I think if they would go to our website at esgr.mil, they'll find some volunteer information there. They'll find more information about who we are as an organization. But I'm a person-to-person kind of guy, and I believe in the power of personal outreach. So I would hope our volunteers would also help us with that, help us to grow.
Yep.
To just ask people, would you like to become an ESGR volunteer? How about going with me to an event or something? And I'll show you what we do and see if that has an interesting to you.
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you. Oh,
you can't get excited by those people in uniform. It'll be hard for you to get excited about anything.
Hey, though, Ron, you're exactly right. And we were having problems with our social media, right? I mean, we just weren't getting it. None of us knew enough about it to do it. And then I asked Mike, who I was retiring from one of the cities, and he happened to be a public affairs manager for the city, and I've seen him on TV, and I already interviewed him because I saw him on Channel 3 News, and I'm going, you know what? We got to have that guy. And so we reached out to him, and sure enough, look, he's on board. And he's been really, really, I mean, our social feeds are starting to really pick up, getting a lot of hits. And it's because he's a good writer and he gets that stuff done. So yeah, we're looking for people like that. And everybody that we've asked, Ron, I haven't asked anybody that really hasn't come on board. They really want to. The problem is keeping them engaged, right? Because we need to
absolutely
involved and give them, meaningful things to do. And really, there's nothing more. I mean, this is self-rewarding when you go out and you talk to employers about our service members and about what the ESGR can do for them. This is just, I mean, it's rewarding to go out and give these rewards on behalf of the service member. And it just goes so far in this, and like the emotion, just like what Mike mentioned earlier, they're emotional. They don't even put these awards down. They just hug them. And they don't even want to, here, let's put this over here. No, I'll hang on to it. And, and it's very rewarding. It really is. I can't say any more than that. And I think that's what keeps us all going is the passion for it. And you know what? We're not looking for anything. We're just out here. We enjoy doing what we're doing, and we're making some good progress. So I just wanted to put a plug in for that because I know that we certainly need good volunteers.
And what our volunteers do, every one of them, it's important, and it has significance. And there's Douglas MacArthur said in his last address to the Corps of Cadets at West Point, nobody hates war more than the people in the service, the ones who have to fight the battles and deal with all the sacrifice. But for us, if we can't, as volunteers, step forward and stand with them, because we can't repay them, they're engaging in a debt that we can't repay. But this is a step in the right direction to be an ESGR volunteer. So give us a look. We'd like to have you.
Well said, Judge. And thank you so much for your time today, the insights and the conversation. And Dan's always great partnering with you on these podcasts. And Karen, again, thank you for the opportunity to do it. You guys have a great evening, and God bless and keep up the great work.